Voters in the battleground state of Wisconsin say they favor Biden over President Trump in a potential 2020 general election matchup.
I mean, Wisconsin, this is important.
According to the latest Marquette Law School poll, the former vice president leads Trump 51-42 in a head-to-head. Senator Bernie Sanders also beats Trump 48-44. Trump ties Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris in their 2020 matchups. Meanwhile, Biden has an 8-point lead on his fellow 2020 contenders among Wisconsin Democratic voters with 28% support. Sanders comes in second place with 20%. Warren rounds out the top three with 17% backing her.
Rick Tyler, let's go back to the head-to-head matchup, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I'll say what I've been saying for the past month. It's not so indicative of what's going to happen, 12, 13, 14 months from now. But it is indicative of how Americans have reacted to the racial animus that he has stirred up on the campaign trail over the past month. This past month, this summer, where Nimrods have been running around going, oh, this is good for his base. He's solidifying his base. Well, he's got the 38%. He could say he's Elton John, and they'd believe him. All right, so great, you got that 38%. What are you going to do with the other 62%? And we've seen here a massive bleeding over the summer since this racial animus, a massive bleeding over the summer of educated voters, suburban voters, women voters, non-white voters, younger voters, a lot of voters. He's getting pounded in every poll in every swing state, Rick.
And what's remarkable about that all happening, Joe, is the economy has stayed relatively strong. With an economy this strong, you'd expect the president to be somewhere in the 50% range or higher. Particularly how strong this economy would be I would expect him to be much higher than that. He's not. He's been unable. I've said this since before Donald Trump was president. He's not going to be able to grow beyond his base. He's not going to be able to change. But Biden has a problem. He has got to clean this up. His campaign must be telling him this can't go on any longer. When he talks about, I understand his motivation about talking about the valor of soldiers. But you can't talk about an event that didn't actually happen, where you didn't actually pin medals on anybody. You got the rank of the officer wrong, you got the location wrong, and you got the person pinning the medals on wrong, which was not him. That just can't keep happening.
Yeah.
Joe Biden's got to start either listening to his staff or straighten up his act, because we can't afford another president who can't determine fact from fiction.
Well, he's got to, he's got to tighten up his game. His staff needs to tighten up their game. He doesn't need to wander into audiences and go full Joe Biden. I mean, he needs to
He's in the lead.
How many times have we seen Donald Trump just walk around in crowds, talking to people, he doesn't. Gets up, he gives a speech, he gets off the stage, he does interviews. Joe Biden is being undisciplined right now. He needs to tighten it up. If he wants to be president, if he really thinks it's important to beat Donald Trump, he needs to start acting like a more conventional candidate. Because I know the whole, hey, let Biden be Biden thing doesn't work. Hasn't worked in the last two campaigns. It's not going to work in this campaign. Get up there, read the teleprompter, deliver your speech like Trump. Do what Barack Obama did. Barack Obama was very disciplined. It wasn't easy to get to Barack Obama.
I have to say, I did not think it was a strong rebuttal for Biden to say that, oh, it was a story about valor, so it's okay for the details to be a little slippery. I mean, everyone knows that war stories, soldiers love to get together, have a couple of beers.
I got it wrong.
Yeah,
move on.
But this is just, he needs to, just like Rick was saying, we've got to have a president who can separate fact from fiction.
It's the age of Trump.
And I do want to quibble with one thing that Rick said about the strong economy. The economy's probably as good as it's ever going to get under Donald Trump. And I think that August was so damaging for Donald Trump because the public started to understand the direct results and impact of Donald Trump's economy by Twitter, with the Dow, dropping 2.5% a couple of days in August, and just how Donald Trump would rollick the market by his casual comments about the trade war. And as long as the economy's strong, maybe voters who excuse the racism will be okay with it. But if you've got the racism and then a recession, Donald Trump his political prospects are done.
Well, I do think, Mika, this is the month that it really did clarify for a lot of voters, Republicans, Independent, just the dust up with China, the fact that he called the Chinese leader the enemy, fact that China, he ordered American businesses out of China. We have a free market here. He's not Xi. It's not President Xi or Putin. He ordered those out, called the Fed chairman an enemy of the United States. I do think that had to have a real drag on his poll numbers, too. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.